Not long ago, I came on this very show and said the Pac-12 should not go to an 8-game conference schedule. But then I got an idea from a listener, and it's not the worst idea I've heard. Let's go.
Are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster. Thanks for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching the show so you can stay up to date with the content that's coming out, all the latest takes, news, information, everything we cover right here on the show. And we start today with a mailbag question. This comes courtesy of YouTube commenter Matt Hummel, who found one of the 4 ways that you could get a question answered by yours truly right here on the show for all the world to hear. You can tweet with the hashtag AskLOP12, or you can DM me at Smalls_55 or at LO_Pac12, or you just hop in the YouTube comments. I check them every day. You drop a question in there, I'll answer right here on the show. Matt asks, or I guess he pitches the idea. It's not the worst one I've heard. Idea, : I'm just, reading it word for word, letter for letter, and syllable or sign for sign. Anyway, I'll stop now. Idea: remove a conference game and have the conference championship be a 2-round play-in, top 4 teams with top 2 hosting the semifinals before a showdown in Vegas. This is 1, a way for the conference to make a splash, and 2, gives the Pac-12 champ 2 decent or good wins on the resume going into the playoff. Well, first of all, Matt, I love the optimism here that the Pac-12 has got a team back in the playoff discussion. You go, Glenn Coco. I don't know who that's going to be this year. I don't expect there to be one. Sad reality of college football at this point in time out on the West Coast. But I've heard this idea get thrown around loosely before. I've heard it tied to the SEC, but basically any conference could go to this format if they choose that. I'm also not up to date, I'll say, on all the rules and whether or not they're allowed to do something like that. But thanks to our good friend George Kliavkoff, Pac-12 commissioner, he did just give the conference a lot more flexibility when determining who they put into a championship game, and divisions are no longer required. And that rule will come into my overall take on this idea a little bit later. But when I read this and thought about it pertaining to the Pac-12, I thought, all right, I see how that could work, right? It's basically the Pac-12 having its own playoff, right? It would be the Pac-12 having its own little mini 4-team playoff that teams are trying to get into. And if you nullify divisions, as the Pac-12 has essentially done, first of all, if this idea were to come to fruition, you would have to get rid of divisions entirely. You can't like that. That's unquestionable. It can't be, it has to be what they have now, which is divisions really don't matter. You just take the top 4 teams. You go 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, 1 and 2 get the host. And then the winners go and meet at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. So do I understand the appeal of this? Yes, I think you market it as kind of the Pac-12 playoff. Nice alliteration there, by the way. And, a playoff within your own conference, it is a way to stand out. I think Matt is certainly right about that. It would give them teams opportunities to have good wins going into the playoff. Yeah, in theory, that could be. That also, though, is dependent on what the Pac-12, broadly speaking, needs to get back to the college football playoff, which is they need teams to be good. They need them to be well run, and they have to win games. I mean, if you go 1 through 4 and, seeds 3 and 4, which, let's say both of them lose the semifinal games, and it's a couple of 7 and 5, 8 and 4 ball clubs, is like, that's a baseball term. Sorry. I was watching baseball earlier tonight, but go Mariners. I just don't think that would do a ton. So I think that doesn't totally fix the problem of the depth and respect nationally that the Pac-12 needs to be in the college football playoff discussion isn't really there at this point in time. So I don't know that it completely solves that issue, but would it be a way to make a splash? Yeah. I can't argue that point because the Pac-12 would be the first conference to do it. And by the way, I haven't seen that this is, gaining any traction or proposed. Like, this is just an idea out there, and I think a really fascinating one. I understand the appeal of it. However, as a college football fan in general, right, put my Pac-12 fandom aside, I am somebody who is of the belief that the college football regular season is the best thing in all of sports. It is my favorite thing to watch on TV. Anybody asks me, and knows that I'm a big sports fan. I follow all the sports. Well, I mean, not all of them. Soccer, mostly when countries are competing. I don't follow hockey, but basketball, baseball, football, and I'm a huge golf guy. I'm following it all. So people ask, well, what's your favorite one to watch? The answer is college football. And the reason that answer is college football is that the regular season is just incredible. And each week means so much, even more so than in the NFL. I mean, playoff teams that end up winning the Super Bowl can lose 4, 5, 6 games in the regular season. In college football, if you want to get to the college football playoff, or if you want to win a conference championship, you can lose 1, maybe 2, but 2 takes you out of the playoff discussion and leaves you in the, okay, let's just win the conference championship, get to a New Year's Six Bowl conversation, right? So there's nothing like the college football regular season and the pressure that is on these teams every week. So as a fan in general, I tend to be partial towards defending the integrity of the regular season. And what I mean by that is I don't want to take away from big time regular season matchups or devalue it or, limit the number of big time scheduling opportunities. That's why I've talked about scheduling a lot here since I've been hosting the show, and will continue to do so, because the way that you have great Saturdays in college football is you have really good matchups, and you do that through scheduling. But I think when you're talking about, making a playoff within a conference, what you're then doing is sort of placing an eye, like you have one eye on the game in front of you, but one eye on, well, are we going to be able to get into the Pac-12 playoff, right? And it'll just be all about, can we get into the playoff rather than the championship game? So I think that it's not totally necessary. It's not the worst idea out there. I mean, if they went to an 8-game conference schedule, this is what I would want to see them do, so that you have another quality Pac-12 game there, right? That's, I think, the best thing you could do from the conference perspective if you wanted to go to an 8-game slate, which many of you know I do not. But I don't think this is necessary. It's just also not a bad idea, because it would add some intrigue. There's no doubt about that. But I don't know that it would do a ton for the conference. Because like I said earlier, if the potential for adding another quality win is there, but if that's not actually against good teams because schools haven't been recruiting or the coaching is not up to par or whatever the case may be, or however you want to assess the Pac-12 struggles in the college football landscape over the last several years, if those things don't change, then putting this in is going to kind of nullify the splash impact you could have or the scheduling boost that you could create. And the other thing is, if you have an eye on this sort of conference playoff that you would have, then you're taking out a potential regular season matchup. And I just don't think that, like, it would technically be the regular season, but it would technically not. And I'm just more a fan. I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in that sense of, give me a 9-game conference slate, not 8. I think the SEC should play 9. I think the ACC should play 9, like the Big 10 and the Big 12 do. Pretty sure those both do, but the Pac-12 does. And I think everybody should do that. Everybody should also know that Built has got a chewy, chocolatey brownie that is a caramel brownie bar. They're available at built.com. They've got 17 grams of protein, and they are chewy, chocolatey deliciousness. Absolutely delectable treats. Forget about dessert. They're better than dessert, but they're actually kind of good for you too. With 17 grams of protein, I've got them in my golf bag to keep me going on the course. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, like no joke, 100% real chocolate. I know, because sometimes it melts a little if I leave it in my golf bag for too long, or if it's really hot outside, but it still tastes delicious. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. So this idea of an in-conference playoff is an intriguing one. and worthy of examination. But I think the answer because the problem in theory that I think Matt is trying to solve with this idea is you want to create the most excitement you can around your conference, and you also want to have the best teams matching up in the championship game. I don't think implementing an in-conference playoff is necessary. I think what they needed to do is what they did a couple weeks ago, where they said, okay, divisions don't matter anymore. We're just going to put into the championship game the two teams with the best conference winning percentage. Because the other thing that could happen is you don't know what game is going to be missed, right? Because I'm not in control of scheduling. I wish I was, but if you're taking out a regular season matchup, you don't know what game that's going to be. So you could potentially, depending on how the conference is shaping up, say, Utah and USC are the top teams, and, maybe Oregon has fallen down a little bit, but then there's no fourth team. But Oregon has still got, a good season going, just not a great one. And so instead of USC playing Utah, for instance, in a game that could decide who's going to end up in Las Vegas for the Pac-12 championship game, you could then have them playing against an Oregon team that is not quite where they usually are, right? Like, say they come in with 3 or 4 losses already when they go into this hypothetical 4-team playoff, and that game takes the place of what would have been a Utah USC matchup, or maybe a USC UCLA. I mean, that's a protected rivalry in there, so that's not a good example. But Utah USC is, in theory, once you get rid of divisions, not as protected. I'm just saying, kind of spitballing here, but I just don't think it's needed. And I think you could just bring other factors into play, like missing a big time game or a big time matchup that would otherwise have, kind of a championship implication playoff feel. Like, I just don't think that it's needed to go to, a 4-team playoff to decide the champion. There needed to be a rule change, but they've already made that. And I think that they got it right, and we'll see the results of that going forward. But I still appreciate the question, Matt. I think it's a really fascinating idea. I just don't happen to think it's something that is needed. Keep the questions coming. Tweet with the hashtag AskLOP12. You can DM me at LO_Pac12 or at Smalls_55, or just hop in the YouTube comments, ask me a question about whatever. I'll answer it here on the show. If you want to ask me something about, I don't know, life, philosophy, something, history, I don't know, ask me whatever. But, it's probably better if it's about Pac-12 football and basketball and such. Let's move to our next coaching evaluation, and that is the longest tenured coach in the conference, and it's not particularly close. And his tenure actually precedes the Pac-12 conference at this particular school. If you don't know who I'm talking about by now, the answer to that question in your mind is one Kyle Whittingham, who has spent 18 seasons in Utah with the Utes, and you just don't see that anymore. At a program like Utah that has not been to a national championship game, at least that I know of. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but I don't believe they've been there. And they just got to a Rose Bowl for the first time, though they'd been in the Sugar Bowl, and they won it back in 2008 in a 13-0 season. Who knows what might have happened that year had there been a college football playoff? You never know. But you just don't see a lot of coaches nowadays staying at a program like Utah, which for sure is a really good program, but it is that and has that reputation because Kyle Whittingham has stayed there. I think in the modern era, and he's a little bit more old school, and he feels more old school, right? I think that's what's so great about him, among many things, when you're looking at him as a football coach. But you look at these coaches in the modern era now, they would use Utah more as a stepping stone. But Kyle Whittingham, I'm sure he's had offers over the years. He has to have had offers over the years to go to bigger schools. I mean, Utah hasn't even been a Power 5 school for that long. So he certainly had a bunch of up, but he has stayed with the Utes. And I think that's one thing that makes him so great. I mean, 18 total seasons. His overall evaluation is an A. And remember, for those of you that might be new to this or have recently subscribed to the channel and haven't seen these ongoing coaching series and evaluations that I've been doing, or this ongoing series and these evaluations, sorry, my mother ingrained that in me, to just always be grammatically correct and such. Anyway, you got an overall grade, recruiting, game management and scheme, player evaluation, assistant hires. 5 areas to grade college football coaches in the Pac-12, and Kyle Whittingham gets our highest overall grade so far with an A. And the only reason it's not an A+ is because he hasn't gotten Utah to the college football playoff yet. But I'm not handing out A's like candy here. I consider a C average. Anything above that is above average. And Kyle at Whittingham, way above average. Loyalty a part of that. But it hasn't just been that he stayed. It's that he's been winning so much. I mean, he's had 2 losing seasons in the Pac-12. All right. And I'm just looking today at when I'm evaluating him at his time in the Pac-12 conference, because it's a Pac-12 show. But newsflash, he was really good when Utah was in the Mountain West as well. Like I said, they won a Sugar Bowl. He's had 2 losing seasons in the Pac-12, just 2 in 11 years. That is mighty impressive. And he is coming from the Mountain West, so I think there was probably an expectation. I'd have to go back and look at all the headlines and everything, but people were probably asking those questions. Oh, you're making a jump to a Power 5. It's going to be too much. It's a different level. Yada yada. Yeah, Kyle Whittingham clearly does not care one bit. His only 2 losing seasons, by the way, he went 5-7. So it's not like there's never been a disastrous season for Utah with Kyle Whittingham. Ever. There's never been a 1-11, a 2-10, a 3-9, or even a 4-8. They've won at least 5 games every year he's been there. It's been remarkable. He's got a 10-4 record in bowl games. He has lost 3 in a row, which means before that he was 10-1 in bowl games. And if you want to look at what makes a good coach, the ability to beat a non-conference opponent in a bowl game and prepare your team for that, that takes a lot. And being 10-1, that's ridiculous. So I think he's coming back down to earth a little bit. But God, that Sugar Bowl or that Rose Bowl last year was so good. Won the Sugar Bowl in 2008. Very nearly had his second BCS New Year's Six Bowl a season ago. But so overall, he gets an A. And again, only reason it's not an A+ is because he hasn't been to the college football playoff yet. In the college football fandom world, that's what we would call first world problems. His recruiting, I give a B+. Every year he's been in the Pac-12, except for one, they've been top 50 nationally. And Utah, I think in the last few years, has started to emerge more and more as a state that has some good talent at the high school level coming out of their various schools across the state. You think about the Sewell brothers most recently, but there have been a lot of guys over the years. And I think it's, one of those states very much like a Washington or an Arizona where other schools from around the country are starting to kind of creep into that territory more and more on the recruiting trail because they see the talent that is coming out of there on a pretty consistent basis. It's, not a recruiting power per se, which is why it's pretty impressive that they've been top 50 nationally every season but one, while Kyle Whittingham has been there. But you come in as a former Mountain West program, and it's not in a state like Texas or California where there's a bunch of kids right in your back door who are big-time talents. I mean, he's had to go and get some, but he's also just developed an identity on the recruiting trail of finding players who fit his scheme, who fit his mindset, his culture and mentality that he has built up there for the Utes and just developing them really, really well, which I'll get to in a sec. So overall, recruiting, B+. It's been nothing special, right? They haven't cracked the top 20 before, but being in the top 50, I think now, in the coming years, Utes fans should expect them to be top 30. I mean, you've won a Pac-12 championship, been in that game a couple times, very nearly won a Rose Bowl as well within a game of the college football playoff in 2019. I mean, it's starting to become a program that has more national respect. So I think you should be able to start to dive into other states more than they perhaps have in the past and get some big time players. But they also don't need to because Whittingham knows exactly what he is doing. Game management and scheme, I give an A-. I think if you ask Utah fans, and again, I'm not giving out a lot of A's here, but you can't win that many games if you aren't good schematically. If you talk to Utah fans and some interactions I've had with them here on the show and in the YouTube comments and such, which I very much appreciate and love to see, I'm all about show engagement. Even if you think I'm a total idiot, you hop in the comments, say, Spencer, you're an idiot. I'm not going to hold it against you. That's okay. I think if you ask Utah fans, they would say, the last few years leading up to, or the several years leading up to the last few, the offense has kind of been what's been holding them back. And the defenses have always been there, but it's always been about, can the offense step up? Can the offense and they have, right? In the last several years, I think they have with Tyler Huntley, now with Cam Rising. They've had some, really explosive. They've had some explosive playmakers. Britton Covey in that mix. Zach Moss, who's gone on in the NFL. Tyler Huntley, by the way, is a backup on the Ravens, I believe, which, good for him. But the offense, I think, has had some seasons with Whittingham, who's a defensively oriented coach. They've had some years where they've come up short, but the defense is always there. And when the offense starts to, at least start to rise to that level, they don't have to be where the defense is for Utah to win, because defensively they're going to be so solid year in and year out. I mean, the offenses don't have to be great, but if they can just be good, then you're going to win a lot of games. And we've seen that with Utah in the last few years. But, overall, I give them an A- on game management and scheme, because Utah they just keep winning. You have to be good on Saturdays, especially if you're not a recruiting power, which Utah certainly is not, right? They're not like, Oregon the last few years has really just gotten by on their recruiting success. I think if you talk to Duck fans, they'll tell you schematically Mario Cristobal and, definitely his first offensive coordinator, Marcus Arroyo, were not the sharpest on game days and made some head-scratching moves. And, Kyle Whittingham definitely exposed that last year twice when he smacked them all up and down the field in a couple weeks' time. So I think that he's good on Saturdays. And player development, I give him an A just because I don't know what's required for an A+. Maybe it is. A+, doesn't really matter. I mean, they've sent guys to the NFL, but what Utah does well is something I was talking about earlier in the show. They bring in players who fit what they need, who fit what they are going to do, and they know exactly how to allow them to grow within the program and just be successful. Just be successful college football players first. But now you're starting to see guys go off like a Zach Moss or Tyler Huntley as a backup, or, they've sent a couple defensive players over the years. Devin Lloyd just got drafted in the first round. I'm pretty sure Devin Lloyd was like a 3-star prospect. I mean, that's what I'm talking about when I refer to player development. Like, can you take a 3-star guy and have him be a first, second, or third round draft pick, right? That's the sort of growth that you want to see from these young guys when you're looking at the state of a program. And Kyle Whittingham does as good a job with that as anybody in the country. And I mean, they just get the most out of the guys that they have. It's not, a program like a Cal or a Colorado or an Oregon State or a Washington State where, you really have to make do with less. I don't think it's that low of a recruiting power. And I think the stats back that up, but it's definitely not an Oregon or a USC or what UCLA could potentially be, or what, Stanford's had some really good classes over the years. It's just not on that level as a school on the recruiting trail right now. I think they're starting to raise the profile. I think they're definitely starting to do that, but do they need to go out and get a billion 4-stars and a couple 5-star guys in a class? No. I mean, you look at any 3 or 4-star guy who they get and you think, yeah, that guy's going to be a good player because he's learned under this particular staff. Speaking of the staff, I give the hires a B to B+. I think we'll go with a B+ here, because one thing you see from really good football programs is either your assistants stick around for a long time, or your assistants, I'm talking about your coordinators here, but other assistants too, or your assistants get hired to be head coaches elsewhere. Utah hasn't had a ton of that, though. They've had some turnover with their coordinator slots. Every school has, and when you're there for 18 years, that's certainly the case. But I think of them a little bit more like Clemson with Dabo Swinney, who just lost both those coordinators after having them forever, right? And Andy Ludwig is their offensive coordinator. He's in his second stint with Utah. He was with the Utes for several years and then left, and now he's back, and he's definitely brought the offense back to where they needed to be to compete at a conference championship level. Clearly, they rolled to it last year, as we all remember. And Morgan Scalley, to me, their defensive coordinator, is just a quintessential Utah sort of guy and embodies what Kyle Whittingham has represented there. He's been on the staff for 14 years. This is his 6th as defensive coordinator. But, anytime Utah loses a coordinator, you kind of expect them to promote from within, and you expect it to be successful as well. Same kind of thing with Stanford. Like, they very much keep things in-house, whereas a place like Oregon or USC or UCLA tend to go outside to bring it, or Washington State just brought in an outside offensive coordinator as well, Eric Morris, coming from Incarnate Ward at the FCS level. So I think that's definitely part of Utah football and has been for a while. So I'll give them a B+, because you can't have a successful college football program with just a good head coach. You have to make good hires. And, I wouldn't say that they've brought in just these unbelievable guys who are brilliant schematically, but they've clearly been good, right? They've not been liabilities. They have not been, you just can't win that many games. You can't win that many games if you don't have good assistants coming in, and Kyle Whittingham knows what he is looking for, finds guys who, are going to buy into what he is selling, and what he sells is, a lot of wins. Only 2 years under 500 in 18 tries with the Utes, and those were both 5-7 campaigns. That is, as the young people say, elite. I appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.